All right, welcome everyone. We're in BlackHat at the beautiful Plaza Suite here with the audience first team, and I've got Yoad Fekete. He's the founder and CEO of BlindSpot Security, and we're going to talk about blind spots today.
Let's do that.
Yoad, we're in hot Vegas. It's 108 degrees. I think it's safe to say, and we're glad air conditioning exists
Oh
today.
my God, it's not humid. That's the good part.
It's not humid. You're coming from Tel Aviv, right?
Yep,
So Tel Aviv humidity. You walk outside, it's like 95 degrees. You're
crazy.
water, right?
Exactly.
So, Yoad, why'd you start BlindSpot Security? What was kind of the need you were trying to solve when you started this company?
Well, it was 2021, and everybody could come with a presentation and raise money. So that's I decided. No, I'm kidding. I worked for Microsoft in my last role, and I've led a group of DevOps engineers over there. And we were part of the incident response team for the SolarWinds attack over there. And after this breach, I was looking for a solution to bring to the company that could help us solve, future incidents, God forbid. And I couldn't find anything. And that's when I decided that that's something that it's solvable. I know the right person that could join me and actually make it happen. And a year and a few months later, and here I am.
We often, Danny, who's in the room here with us, and she's trying to educate people on how to approach CISOs. But I think a lot of CISOs have never been in the shoes of starting a company, right? And kind of going out and raising money. We have to ask CFOs for money typically, right? As a practitioner, my CFO gets the best presents. I got him in espressos. So now I send him espresso capsules like every month.
And now he's asking for beans, right?
Right now he wants to upgrade his machine and get beans, and he wants to know the good kind of beans and whatnot. But going out on your own, starting a company a few years ago, what's the ultimate kind of, where do you see this company going?
It's a good question, Ike, and I will double click on what you said on Danny. I think that on my first 6 months in the business, I didn't know how to approach CISOs, and I used all kind of random acronyms like the guys and it didn't work. And I'm the opposite way. Like when people ask me for DevOps advices on LinkedIn, I immediately answered, but then I realized that the market is so saturated and the CISO are so saturated that you need um, you need a different approach for that. And I sat around and saw a lot of Danny's video with Chris and other CISOs, and it made me realize that we need to do something different in terms of reaching out and marketing, and that's like where the point got me to the phase that today it's like, as far as I can tell, is zero bullshit. So it's either I answer a pain, a need, or not. And
So let's talk about that pain for a second, right? Because the pain you're trying to solve is a real one. All of us exist in the world of writing millions and billions and so many lines of code. You're an open source, what I like to call the open source shark fest pool. That's, yeah, it's got some good fish you can eat, but it's also got a lot of non-kosher and a lot of predators that can seem innocent and then all of a sudden really really create a bunch of wreak havoc in your environment.
yeah.
Talk about this pain point you're trying to solve, and really kind of the start of the pain point. What's the value add?
So I think it kind of divides to two areas. One is your company, and the second one is what you bring home. So eventually, and was it in Microsoft and previous companies that I worked for before, you invest a lot of money in the posture of your company, but you can't really do the same for the open source you bring home. And how do you verify that you bring in only innocent ingredients to the system? So there are two parts of that. One is known vulnerabilities. Everybody does that. It's a commodity. You have to do it. And today it got to the point that it's probably 95% noise and 5% maybe real exploitable data. And the other part is the trojans, the unknown. And I think that's the part that's missing a lot of education these days. And we can take the Solarwind case, which is the poster kid attack, right? But since then, there have been a lot of attacks, and I'm not speaking. Everybody knows Log4j. Log4j is still a vulnerability.
It's a 0 day.
It's a 0 day, but it's still a vulnerability. It's a mistake.
Right.
Somebody did a mistake, and now it can be exploited. And we're speaking on Solarwinds or 3.6 that happened a few months ago, Parser.js that happened like about a year and a half ago, Jump Cloud incident that just happened.
Yep.
That's actual malicious attack. It's a compromise by definition. And I think that's the biggest part that we were trying to solve, that if somebody gets to your organization through your weakest link, how do you know that ingredient is innocent or not? So that's what we're doing. That's the value proposition we're doing today.
So you look at, you talked about a whole slew of different cyber incidents that have taken place. There's this blind trust in the supply chain today, and I don't want to say it's blind by choice, right? It's almost blind because you don't have a choice as a practitioner. A lot of security practitioners would love to say no to specific vendors or to specific softwares coming in our environment, but we have to pick battles and we have to pick hills we're willing to die on, right? Not every hill's worth dying on. How do you see solving that challenge of being able to overcome all of these different tools and apps that end up in your environment that end up creating blind spots really for practitioners?
Yeah, actually, we had a good discussion this morning on that. Eventually, today, the way to kind of do third-party risk is questionnaires, and then you send. I just got one from one of our customers, and when I fill it out, I'm saying okay, and I can send him my latest report. I've done a PT, and then I will send them my last vulnerability scanning. I mean, we do dog fooding for our own environment, but it doesn't matter because tomorrow there can be another incident that happened, or it's something that happened in time, right? It's a point in time, and you need to know consistently that everything he brings home is safe. So the way I see it, it's kind of like a trust portal. You need to have some kind of system that can digest those ingredients, that software you bring in home, and tell you what it contains and how it affects you. Because we've seen that hype cycle for the SBOM thing that's going on for the past couple of years, I think, even more. And eventually, that's just a document that tells you what ingredients the vendor brings, but it doesn't tell you if and how it affects your organization, what you need to do with that. Did they fix it? Will they fix it? Can they fix it? Do you need to fix it? So that's kind of the challenges that I think that organization I had to deal with in my previous world has to deal with today. And that's something we're trying to solve and figure out how can we make sure an organization knows that at least every open source third party it brings home, how it affects the organization itself.
You look at these third parties, you look at all these different tools, and it's third and it's fourth and it's fifth and it's sixth party, right? I mean, the victims of SolarWinds primarily were government and Microsoft, right? But then Microsoft had a slew of millions of subsequent sub victims based on them falling victim to SolarWinds, and none of Microsoft's customers could tell Microsoft, hey, are you using SolarWinds? Is SolarWinds like, the SolarWinds have access? What's the balance you see between kind of third party and supply chain visibility to actual actionable intelligence, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a limit there's a capacity by which we as security people
Yep.
can operate in. Where do you see that line being drawn into sand for you? Is it third, fourth, fifth? Does that even matter, or is it, operating components? Kind of like when you look at like a turbine engine, right? The operating components really matter, as compared to maybe
Yeah, it's a great
the
question.
plastic on the seat.
Yeah, I think eventually, let's say Solarwinds, it happened, right? So I think it's inevitable because we've seen it with nation state actors, and it happened with Solarwinds and with 3.6 and with Jump Cloud, and that's fine. Nobody expect 100% of coverage, especially from nation state attacks. But the thing is that you want to have kind of points in your process, in your software development lifecycle process, that will tell you that before you release your software to your customers, you've done everything you could in order to prevent or stop the breach. Because if you've been attacked, that's one thing. But if you're passing that on to your customers, that's another thing.
So every attack obviously impacts customers, right? Whether it's a consumer with what we saw with the Colorado Department of Higher Education now, or apparently not, the UK election system was breached this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's shocker. There, digital elections are going to be secure somehow. That's an oxymoron for me, but okay. Right, but you see those impact consumers. There seems to be a greater attention on the B2B business side of impact, right? So, SolarWinds impacted Microsoft's business continuity. It impacted the ability of Microsoft to really continue to develop, to deliver products, to do a lot of different things. And if Microsoft Exchange goes down, right, for an hour, that's a headline on Bleeping Computer or the Hacker News, right? Microsoft outage, and
Yeah.
they're like, as of 40 minutes ago, the story is an hour old, right? As of 40 minutes ago, Microsoft resolved a 20-minute outage. Where's, are we looking at data or are we looking at operations?
It's funny because one of our prospects I've reached out to, I think, a month ago, and they've been hit by an attack. I won't say the name of the attack because
that's fine. That's okay. We don't want you to.
Exactly.
The bad guys listen to this. We see them.
Exactly. and when I spoke with the CISO, and then he told me, sounds interesting. Let me pass you on to my application security manager. And I spoke to him, and I told him, listen, you had an incident like a year and a half ago. You had 3 days of downtime, and you lost money. You needed to do incident response. And I was like, I sat in my chair and I was like, okay, that's a first closed deal. I'm going to call my VC later on and tell him I just closed my first deal. And he was like, yeah, but we're good now. I asked, what do you mean by good? We changed procedures. And then I asked, but how do you know like that the next attack isn't going to affect you? Because you change procedures and now you covered that hole. But there are a lot of opportunities over there. And I think there's still a lack of education today on that matter. Like, let's take 10 years ago when the known vulnerabilities solution came out to the market, even before it, but when it became like a norm, a commodity in your part of the process. So everybody were very educated about it, and then it became part of SOC 2 and other compliance regulations, which, by the way, we are seeing today with CI/CD regulation, with the NIST and the US government. But still, I think it will take at least 2 to 4 years before we can actually see security professionals take action in terms of actual attacks, because they're still not liable for that. It's not regulated yet. It's not required in the current public compliance, unless if you develop software to the US government, that's one thing. But if it's only for the public sector, you don't need to adhere to one of those regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I've yet to see a regulation stop a data breach or bad practice. I've seen companies pay off regulations. I've seen companies pay fines and say, we're going to do better. And, they end up in the headline again just about a year later. I'm one of those people who I don't think government can solve these problems through regulation.
Yep.
Right. Like, I feel like this has to be an industry standard. This has to be something that starts with the giants that's kind of trickled down type of approach in order for it to really have any sort of teeth. Because, I mean, we saw the SEC rules last week, right? You've got to report an incident within 4 days. What do I know about an incident in 4 days?
Yeah. GDPR, data breaches, you have to do it like even less.
Yeah, 72 hours, I think, right? But what do I know in 4 days? I don't know anything. I don't know much. I know I'm going through an event. I know that there's potential impact, but I don't know everything. And so this idea that we're reporting in 4 days, I feel like that's adding, betting chances.
I haven't thought about it this way, actually.
It's almost like betting on a game, and you're betting on a play-by-play type of thing. All right, is Messi now going to score? Is
will,
right? And I'm going to go see him next month when it comes to Atlanta. I'm really excited, but is he going to score now? And if he is, the odds are 4-1. And I feel like all the SEC did was essentially say, here you go, let's bet on a stock. Yep. They're going through an incident. They don't know how severe it is. Oh, man, let's short the stock, right? Because people are going to run away from it because they don't know what it is. And it's been 4 days. I mean, how do you not know? Everyone knows. Yeah. It's so easy to know. Go on, Google it. Who hacked so-and-so? Google will tell you. AI will, right? ChatGPT will.
Well, it has data just, until 2021.
I don't know. They're feeding it data now. They're feeding it data. Different companies are feeding it data. I've heard a bunch of AI claims in the last several weeks that have made my head almost want to explode, like Chris Roberts does when he reads a really bad sales ad, right? Like a really bad sales email. Like, hey, can I get 7 minutes of your time to talk about 3 things?
7 minutes is good.
7 minutes. That's what they're asking for nowadays. 7 to 15. But anyways, going back to the CI/CD pipeline, right? Going back to open source, you've got open source repositories, you've got PyPy, you've got all these different kind of intermixtures. How do you start kind of grasping that? And does BlindSpot have anything in mind for CI/CD, kind of security?
Yeah, so I think one of the first thing that I've experienced with working with engineers in my companies before that is that they don't care about security. Most of them, I would say, roughly. I pre-apologize for those who are, but about 85% at least. And they bring anything they need or want to the organization, and it makes sense,
right?
If you need a calculator, you won't try and figure out, oh, I will go and see this kind of package. It has more maintainers, so it's probably more updated, and I'll go and they see the first one and they get it. And we need to keep that productivity going. And the way we've approached that is that we want to know if it's safe or not. How do you check that? You have 2 areas. First, sanity in the code. You want to look at the code and figure out if it's doing anything malicious. That's the first part. And the second part, you want to know if the process has been compromised. How would you do that? So what we are doing is basically we're taking the end product, whether it's a dependency or your own software, and we're decomposing it to its ingredients. So for example, in Java, we decompose the jar and we take it and then we compare it to the source code. Why? If you compare the binary to the source code and they match, nothing happened in between. That's it. You don't need to implement anything on the CI/CD itself. You don't need to ask the open source vendor to start implementing all kind of security measures. You don't need to ask your developer to implement thinking when he's getting a new dependency. Of course, best practice and in an optimal world, he or she will do that. but we're not there yet, at least. So that's our approach. It's like, and Chris, I'm sorry, but it's like it's zero trust your developers. Yeah.
Zero trust your developers. Sorry,
Exactly.
Chris, I'm coughing there, buddy. I don't mind zero trusting people as long as I don't say it to, there's a term, trust but verify, right? I mean, and a lot of people have heard the term trust but verify. My challenge is I feel like our CI/CD pipeline and our open source repositories is going to be the downfall of software. And I'll tell you my theory behind it. If you look at nation state adversaries, specifically China, right, which is the number one malicious. I mean, people like to talk about big bad Russia, but I don't buy into the Russia hype. I buy into the China long term. Let me be very quiet, but I'm a quiet undercurrent in the water that's pulling things my way. And everyone's paying attention to the shark fin over there, but that shark isn't bugging anyone. It's bad, right? I'm not saying Russians are good, but at the grand scheme of things, the Chinese are much worse. China's able to put out, what is it? I think the last statistics I saw was 150,000 developers every 6 months into the ecosystem. That's the pace over the next decade that they can do this in. 150,000 new developers every 6 months. No one can do that, those numbers. No one can compete. Potentially India, right? India could potentially do this.
Yeah.
Right. But India's still got a road to go for their education sector in order to be able to produce that capacity. China could theoretically go in and poison every single open source repository with backdoors and trojans. And, we saw what they did with the US military systems where they had, disruption in the grid, and these weren't spyware. This is a kill switch. The moment we deem to use this kill switch, we're going to kill you. And we're going to take all your systems down. How do you start even? How do you go about this as a founder and go, how do we even start to solve for a problem like this one? Because I think that's the real threat. At the end of the day, the real threat is nation states going in and weaponizing software to get backdoors to steal IP, to steal information, to steal data in order to weaponize it later, whether it be to short sell your stock, buy your company, create a, there's a Chinese car maker in China, and I don't know if you've, for those that have, gone to China, it looks exactly like an Audi. It feels like an Audi. All the design is an Audi, but it's a Chinese car maker. And you're like, they didn't steal Audi IP on this? They absolutely did.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
so I think it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, because if I would go back few months and I will speak to a CISO and he would tell me, listen, this is like nation state attacks. And I will tell him, you're right. Why would that happen to you? And, I would say, he's not my persona. He's not my buyer, probably, because he's not afraid and he has good case. But these days, let's take, for example, the jump cloud incident. Again, North Korea, right? Not China, by the way, North Korea.
You mean China's
yeah.
China's lackey, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then eventually, if you have customers, if you're a software provider and you have customers and you're a target, and they did it in a very sophisticated way. So eventually you need to put a measure at the end of the road of the SDLC before it gets customers. Again, if you're being compromised, that's one thing. You need to put everywhere that is a distribution point in your process, you need some kind of control that will tell you this is equals what you had in your source code, 1-to-1. And then you know that even if they're very, very silent, and they'll get to your organization. They might hurt you. They might steal data from your organization, which is bad, but there are solutions for that as well, right? They wouldn't put anything that will compromise your customers. You won't ship software that contains other things that you didn't intend to. Again, it's not 100%, right? You know
Nothing
better.
is.
Exactly.
Nothing is.
Everybody knows that.
I don't think there's any person who practices responsible cybersecurity that tells you anything's 100%.
That's why when customers ask me, can you guarantee that? I tell them no, because I'm hackable as well. And if I protect you and somebody compromises me, it can happen.
No, that's real. I mean, we see if you look at what happened last week, give you a prime example, the Five Eyes, right? I think it was earlier this week, over the weekend. So the Five Eyes released, these are the most exploitable vulnerabilities we're seeing in the world. Right, and they kind of named the top 5 or 6 of them. You know what the top 4 were? F5, Evante, and Fortinet. Now, all 3 have big booth here at BlackHat.
Yeah.
All 3 are giving talks. All 3 spend a lot of money to be here, yet all 3 have critical vulnerabilities that are the most exploitable vulnerabilities by threat actors in the marketplace today.
Yeah.
Not Microsoft, not Apple, not Google. They're all respective, not Oracle, not SAP. All of them respective in their own way with their own vulnerabilities. It seems like we forget to patch our security products sometimes, or we forget to address the fact that our security product has an issue that we should probably be taking care of.
As the producer, or like where it's in the company already?
I think both, but I think there's a joint responsibility there, right? If I'm a security company and I produce software that's supposed to secure your organization that now is causing an issue, how is it that I'm letting it go 2 years unpatched? At what point do you call your customer and say, you're soiling my reputation? Because you're going to get breached. The moment you get breached, I'm going to be the vector, which means my name's going to be in there attached to yours, saying hackers hacked the Norwegian government because of the, Ivanti mobile core iron, whatever, mobile iron core product, or endpoint EPMM. They keep renaming stuff. I'm sick of it. Give it a name, stick to it. Stop rebranding stuff, right? Like, stop it. Seriously, like, stupid. Just stop. Don't rebrand it. Yeah, like, don't. It's the same thing with threat actors. They give them 732,000 names. You don't know who they're talking about. Like, you don't. This company, Palo, names it, water. These guys name it cola, and these guys name it Pepsi. Name it one name, please. Like, go pull a name. Chris, can you solve that? One name. That's it. That's all I want. One name. One name for an APT. Give it one name. That's it. Whoever finds it first gets to pick it, and everyone else got to call it that.
I agree.
Right?
I'll take it.
And Palo should call all of the threat actors they find checkpoint something. That'll be
that wouldn't work probably.
That would be hilarious. That'd almost be as good as the billboard that Palo put on Ayalon in Tel Aviv. You're now passing checkpoint. We also did. There's some classic trolling there. So we'll take it. I think it makes it for fun for people like me, because I just enjoy it.
But in terms of the vulnerability, sometimes it's a matter of priority, because the provider wants to provide the software as soon as possible, and then they have like a 6-party vulnerability somewhere that they can even fix, and it will take them a month to figure out how to patch
or 6 months.
Right.
But at what point do you take that
component? And they don't tell them to the consumer.
But so this is where I kind of I've had tackles with technology teams.
Okay.
If we've got a 4th or 5th or 6th party vulnerability, how critical is it to the operation of our product? Meaning, what's the workaround around it? Could we potentially disable it? Could we potentially look at other solutions? Is there a second company, a competitor, that has a similar product that we could use and then discontinue this one? And every contract should have a vulnerability one reporting clause, and it should have a termination clause based on vulnerability if doesn't meet SLA.
That's a super important thing, because I think part of the ASBOM methodology, which we don't have today,
right,
is when you're disclosing a vulnerability, you need to explain if it might hurt you. So it can be either is even are we even using that in the code of the
Right.
product? Because listen, I have a critical vulnerability, but don't worry because I'm not using that function, and that's fine. So don't worry about it. That I'm taking liability for that. Or they can tell the customer it's being used, but if you're using that in an internal network, you're fine as long as it's not exposed. But I think it's a matter of minor critical points that you have to figure out, and that's part of the data that you need to provide to the customer for him to make better decisions to what to do with the product itself, right?
I completely agree with that. I think a CVSS score that's given out by a vendor is important, but it doesn't signify the same thing. A 9.9,
even the APSS, the new one, which is better, but still.
Chris Hughes had a really good write-up on it, by the way, on CVSS 4.0 on CSO Online. I don't know. I was going to cover it on literally my show this morning before I flew in, but I didn't have enough time on the show because I went on a North Korea Russia rant for 3.5 minutes on how China and Russia really don't get along. Yes, they're allies, but they're allies only because we, the West, are stupid in terms of our approach towards Russia. Because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that has gone on behind the scenes leading up to the last year and a half or so of what we're being told, and I feel like we're being highly misinformed because the real threat is the Chinese, and the Chinese operate the North Koreans. And when they want North Korea to go out and do something disruptive, they go out and let them do something disruptive because it's a bargaining chip for the Chinese, right? The North Koreans are a bargaining chip for them every time. So very interesting. So tell us about the future of BlindSpot. You're here at BlackHat. What's next for y'all? What's your expectation from BlackHat? What are you going to be looking to do till the end of this year? What should listeners know about BlindSpot now that they've heard you speak? But what do you want to leave them with here as we wrap up?
Well, I think, and I told that to my team that came with us. It's not a matter of getting leads or signing new customer. That's and I won't let my VCs hear that part.
They're going to hear it.
Yeah.
We're going to cut this out, send it to your VCs. Everyone puts their VCs on their website too. It's great.
The intention is eventually to put some education out. It's not that I think that I know better than anybody else, right? It's just a matter that that's what I've been doing, and I would love to share my experience doing that. And if it resonates, then great. If it doesn't, I'm going to do it like 100 more times, and it will eventually, because as you mentioned, it's Chinese, it can be script kiddies, and it works. We've seen downloads of like 10,000 of downloads of just malicious packages, like people like typo squatting. Customers ask me if we have typo squatting support, and I'm like, if your developer is going to download a package that's called requests S, then he's stupid. Sorry. But yeah, we have support for that if you need that. And what I would like people to know that vulnerabilities is one thing. It's very, very important, but you should safeguard yourself from malicious actors as well, because that's the new way.
Yep.
The perimeter today of a company, it's just too strong. It's very hard to just, we're not in the on-prem era anymore, that people do misconfigurations of checkpoint firewalls. It doesn't happen.
Nope.
And even if so, it's not the usual Tomcat 7 server that you've had, and you can do /admin and then use the default credentials and then do network reversal and
can do that with IoT devices today.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the new Tomcat 7 server.
Exactly. So the risk is coming from attackers shifted their focus, and they understand that 85% or more of the code is open source. And this is a great vector, right? This is a great vector. Or even if you do spear phishing on somebody in the organization, you get to the organization and you take the CI/CD itself, it's quiet. It's hard to figure out if you've been attacked over that, right?
Yeah.
Which happened to SolarWinds and 3.6. A second before the binary has been signed, malicious code has been injected, right? And that's my expectation from this journey in BlackHat and all in all.
Awesome. So what's the website people can go to learn more about BlindSpot Security?
BlindSpot.security.
See, that's so easy. It's in the name.
It's no Coca-Cola or
I mean, there's not even a .com now. It's blindspot.security.
Exactly.
They've started selling those domains.
Overpriced.
I love it. I love it. All right. Yoad, thank you for being on the show, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your support of the Cyber Hub podcast and Audience First and all the awesome people around here. And good luck on your journey. I hope I get to cover your next raise on my show and say, friend of the show, Yoad just raised VCs, give him like 50 million. Yeah, that's
50
nice.
would work.
50 would work, wouldn't it? I mean,
that's at least like 1,000 happy hours for my team.
Yeah, that's a lot of happy hours.
Yeah.
If nothing else, and a bunch of black hats.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.